like, you can't do this. You just can't. Like, TJ Watt counting stats, not even close. They gave him a Career Achievement Award, Defensive Player of the Year. I'm just so sick of everyone kissing Myles Garrett's ass.
The only thing else I got to say is, how about this, Cowboys?
So there are, unfortunately, multiple Cowboys snubs on ESPN's all-quarter century team. The only question is, which Cowboys player was snubbed the most? The reason...
Yeah.
All right, Newbear. Let's get to the first position group that has a possible Cowboy snub. You get to running back. There's a lot of different ways you could have gone with this. They go Priest Holmes. I mean, you look. I know I won multiple fantasy championships with Priest Holmes.
I'm sorry. I have. Before we talk about anyone else, what are we doing with LaDainian Tomlinson, Adrian Peterson? Like, they're not even. They're on the bench.
Practice squads, LaDainian Tomlinson, they really messed this thing up, and so maybe you have to take their rankings with a grain of salt. But what do you think? Is Zeke a legitimate snub candidate here at the running back position?
I brought this up as we were going through. Christian McCaffrey is an otherworldly talent, and when he's healthy, you can argue year in and year out, he's RB1 in the whole league. Certainly, like you were talking about, Priest Holmes helping you win fantasy football. There's an argument to be made that the 3-year run that Priest Holmes had, okay, but it was a 3-year run.
Thank you.
He was a backup in Baltimore, and then he gets to Kansas City and goes gangbusters for 3 years, and then he's basically out with injuries. And when you look at McCaffrey and you look at Zeke and you start getting into counting stats stuff, you look at, okay, McCaffrey has the 1,000, right? He's one of only a handful of dudes, not even a handful of dudes, when you talk about the Roger Craigs and the Marshall Faulks of the world who've actually done stuff like that. But he's also had years where he's played 2-3 games. He's also had years where he's fallen off a cliff. And when you look at how Zeke came out like gangbusters, All-Pro 1, leading the league in rushing as a rookie, he probably does it again because he led the league in yards per game, but the suspension keeps him under $1,000. And then he does it again in year 3. He adds a 4,000-yard season later. If that fourth, fifth year was another super year, or if that second year isn't missing the suspension games, you're legitimately having an argument about Zeke being on this list, because he's also a guy that's catching 50 balls 4 years in a row, 70 balls another year. But LaDainian Tomlinson had a season where he went for 1645 and caught 100 balls and didn't even make the Pro Bowl.
Yeah. I mean, which are we choosing? Are we choosing individual great seasons and short sample sizes, or are we doing body of work? Because
and LT did it for 8-9 years as one of the best in the league. And that's the thing that bothers me about this. Your question is absolutely going to come up to play when we start talking about some of these other positions and some of the Cowboys guys who should be on this team.
So you have Christian McCaffrey here as one of the running backs. Obviously, Derrick Henry, I think because he doesn't have the jukes or the incredible highlight reel runs, he's just big and fast and has good vision. Maybe it would sneak up on you. But some of these stats for Derrick Henry are just beyond reproach. The Cowboys should have gone back, drafted Jalen Ramsey at 4 and Derrick Henry at the top of the second round. No doubt about it. 2.5 yards after contact per carry make him number 1 among all running backs with at least 500 touches since 2000 and a very low fumble rate. Like, all he did was just freaking dominate, and he continues to do so, into a third contract now. So I just wanted to give Derrick Henry the credit he deserves there, while we point out the fact that if we had the chance to do it ourselves, buddy, I agree or disagree, I'm just taking LT and Adrian Peterson, and I got some packages for Christian McCaffrey because of what he can do in the passing game. Those are my 3 runners if I had to pick.
Say it again. So you said LT, McCaffrey, and Henry?
And Adrian Peterson.
Adrian Peterson and Derrick Henry is a really fascinating head-to-head when you look at power runners, angry runners, but also guys who aren't utilized as much in the passing game. I mean, that's the one knock on Derrick Henry. But then at the same time, it's like the system that you're playing in doesn't throw it to him, or they have a third down specialist who comes in and does that for them because they're getting 330, 350, over 400 touches, and the vast majority of them coming as carries, right? And then you have the third down specialist come in because it's not 3rd and inches where you would give the ball to Henry or AD. It's 3rd and 7, and you're in a passing situation. But, at least Peterson has a couple of years where he caught 40 balls, another year where he caught 36 balls. Derrick Henry is going through seasons not even getting 30 targets, right? It's a really fascinating thing. The other thing with him is the stiff arm. right? The signature move that is like when you're literally talking about like finishing moves in Mortal Kombat level for the kids, right? Like, what's the cool pop culture thing that's going to be the deciding factor in something like this when you're talking about guys who are so close? But LaDainian Tomlinson, for not just even on the quarter century, LaDainian Tomlinson for me is arguably the best all-around back in NFL history. You're
incredible.
Talking Walter Payton.
I've interviewed him a handful of times. You know, he went to TCU. He's from the area.
Absolutely.
Total stud.
Yeah.
You know, everything's a 10.
We did some really cool stuff with him with it. I think I have the last pair of his MVP cleats from that ridiculous that run that they went on. And I think what we're also talking about here is the lack of postseason success and where you might elevate some other people, but like McCaffrey fumbled in the Super Bowl. You can talk about how LaDainian didn't get there, but then when Christian did get there, he didn't seal the deal, right? So it's not a real clean argument, but for damn sure will not even hear it about Priest Holmes being RB1 on an 25, can't.
Dude, he won me so many fantasy things that, you know, I'm just going to tip my cap to him for his statistical brilliance there and his statistical production. But I wanted to see if I could maybe approach you about giving away these LaDainian Tomlinson cleats to, you know, a listener to help the audience grow a little bit. Buddy.
Yeah, they're size 15, so it'd have to be a big boy. You know,
I don't think anybody wants to put them on. You know, I think you're probably looking at LaDainian Tomlinson super fans, but I don't know.
Let me rustle them up, and absolutely, let's do it.
Okay, next position here as we look at ESPN's all-quarter century team and Cowboys snubs. We go to a fullback, Kyle Juszczyk. Yeah, no complaints. There's no Cowboys. I think Tyler Klutz was the last, like, fullback they used somewhat regularly. I think he might have scored in the Des Cottet game or maybe that season.
I do think, though, that there's some extreme recency bias here. And also, like, you think about the way the game's played versus how it was played. Lorenzo Neal is really tough to overlook here. Like, I love Kyle Juszczyk, and there's stuff that he does that a guy like Lorenzo Neal couldn't do. But I don't know if Kyle Juszczyk is just putting the cowboy collar or the neck roll on and getting in the hole on ISO and power like Lorenzo frickin' Neal.
Lorenzo Neal, another 10 out of 10, by the way. We just interviewed him at Super Bowl New Orleans. This guy is electrifying. Hilarious.
Yeah. And then, I mean, dude, the fact that the Ricard he's a defensive tackle. He's a 300-pound defensive tackle that they converted to lead the caravan for Lamar and company. And when you think about Patrick Ricard with King Henry, and then, oh, no, just kidding, Lamar took it the other way.
Yeah.
It's insane what Baltimore has going on.
It really is, man, and it's a cheat code, and they got to figure out a way to optimize that and win in January, because that should be a real winning formula. I don't know. I guess I'd have another set of offensive eyes to look at it if this doesn't work. But the indictment of Lamar Jackson is interesting. Like, would he be on an all last 5-year team? I don't think so. Won multiple MVPs, but I think he'd be the fourth quarterback taken if most people were out there selecting. Okay, so no fullback, obviously. Can we get to wide receiver here? They go Randy Moss, Calvin Johnson, Julio Jones, Terrell Owens. There's a little bit of Cowboy, but he's got an Eagle shirt on. And then Marvin Harrison. I imagine if you would do this in 10 years, maybe CeeDee Lamb's going to have a chance to be on this list.
Yeah,
Dez Bryant was at the peak of the wide receiver pecking order for about 3 seasons. I saw it up close and personal. I was doing the post game the entire time. I'd love to make an argument that he belongs on this list, but he didn't have longevity, and I think that's legitimate. You know, and now what sucks about this list is other players didn't need to have longevity, and they got in, as we're going to see. But, I think it's a legitimate thing.
Well, I'm going to lose my shit here, too, because Antonio Brown did stuff that even Jerry Rice didn't do. And the fact that he's on the practice squad with Andre Johnson, and what Andre Johnson did with probably the worst career quarterback situation for any all-time great wide receiver that we're ever going to talk about. What bothers me about the inconsistency on this list is that they're talking about scroll up a little bit, it's Marvin Harrison. They're saying from 1999, 1999 doesn't count. If 1999 counts for Marvin Harrison, why doesn't it count for Marshall Faulk, right? And so you're having this ridiculous conversation. Also, going back over time, guys like Torrey Holt. The wide receiver one is one of the most difficult person for person, player for player, counting stat for counting stat. But the fact that Marvin Harrison gets it over Antonio Brown, and that we're talking about is T.O. a Cowboy or whatever. The one thing that's cool about T.O. is that he's got pop points on his data, Football Reference, wherever you want to go with it. He was All-Pro once in Dallas, but he also led the league in touchdowns in another year. So like some of these counting stats inside of the counting stats are crazy because the bad guy stuff or the media, when you talk about the number, you lead the league in stuff and you've been a Pro Bowler and an All-Pro for years, and then you don't make it in the year that you lead the league, right? When you have some of these, oh, well, this guy's a 5-time Pro Bowler and this guy's a 5-time All-Pro. Like, I mean, Levante David, as you go further down on this thing, has been to 1 Pro Bowl and 1 All-Pro, and he's on the all-quarter century team. What are we doing?
Thank you. Let's move on to tight end. And here's an opportunity to talk about Jason Witten, second all-time in tight end receptions.
Yeah.
Played 16 seasons, missed just 1 game.
There's
What's that?
There's 2 huge Cowboys beefs. And like you said at the top, I just want to reset that the big argument is who's got the bigger beef. This is the first one.
Yeah, this is a bigger beef than Zeke. I don't know what you would do with it here. Let me see if I can manage to share the screen. You got Gronk, and you were telling me you believe he's the number 1 tight end ever to play, and I would agree with you because of how punishing he was, both catching the ball and blocking. And that's something that Jason Witten did incredibly well in his heyday. He was a quarterback's best friend. You get to Travis Kelce. If you want to start a team and take Travis Kelce and you're giving me Jason Witten, I think I have the better player. Same thing with Tony Gonzalez. Same thing with Antonio Gates. Jason Witten gave you plenty of catching. Did he make the highlight reel catch? No, but he gave you yak. Okay, the dude produced, and he blocked his balls off. So I don't want to hear about any of these one-dimensional type of guys being in this conversation with Jason Witten. It's the same thing to me as comparing Luka to Jordan, right? One guy played only offense. The other guy was locked down on both ends of the court. And I think that's very important, especially for tight ends. Newbear.
You started it. I mean, you threw me the lob, and now it's just a matter of if my Achilles is going to snap if I try to dunk it, right? It's like how many 1,000-yard seasons, all the numbers that we talk about with Tony Gonzalez, how many 1,000-yard seasons did he have? Do you know?
Witten?
No, Tony Gonzalez.
I don't know.
12? 4.
What?
4.
What?
4. 4. 4. 4. 4. 4. 4. 4. 4. 4. Tony Gonzalez. I just can't with this nonsense, right? And now, granted, they happened 8 years apart, and they happened, 2000, 2004, back-to-back in 7 and 8. But the number is 4. How many did Jason Witten have?
8.
The answer is also 4.
Oh.
And they both have years where they're in the 900s. Witten almost had 7. He had years with 980, 952, 942. But just to start thinking about some of this stuff, and yeah, you can make, like I always talk about, you can make data work for or against almost any argument you want to have. Like, for example, Jason Witten holds the record for, or held the record when he retired for most catches by a tight end in a season with 110. And Tony Gonzalez's best is 102. What's different about Tony Gonzalez's 102 is that 102 also led the entire league, led all players in catches. But what I was talking about with the lob, and real quick, by the way, how many 1,000-yard season Antonio Gates have? Half that many. So when you get into the raw counting points or the raw counting stats and the data points, what you were talking about with the lob and me wanting to just crush it is that this is purely an aesthetic conversation. Because if you are looking back over a player's career and you are remembering Antonio Gates soaring through the air like a ballerina because he was a basketball player, or Tony Gonzalez doing the same thing because he played in March Madness and he played in the NFL and he's only one, bro, he was 11.4 per catch. Witten is 10.6. Antonio Gates had years, right? Individual years where he's maybe 15-6. He had 1 year where he was 16-2, but he only caught 24 balls. Antonio Gates, for the bulk of his career, was an 11, 12, 13 yard per catch game, or yard per catch period. Tony Gonzalez, 11, 10, 11, 12. Now, Witten fell off at the end of his career, and also Witten in his 110 catch year gets to 1,000 yards on 9.4 yards a catch. Jason Witten is Mr. Y Stick. He is go to the Buick and turn around, right? And then if my helmet comes off, I will still eat your face. But
I love it, dude. I love it how his kid's an awesome linebacker. I can't wait to see what college he chooses. But
Tennessee.
I got the Witten is stayed around too long guy. Sure. We remember six years where he was just
and
mid.
Came back.
And then he came back, and it's like, hey, I'm even more mid. I'm going to go to the Raiders now, and they don't even want to play me. I think like Dak needing a guy who knew the soft spot of the offense or the defense kept his career alive much longer than it should have. I mean, at some point, it was just catch it, turn around, and fall down.
Amen. And that's recency bias. But speaking about going back in time, just to kind of clear the air and just, we talk about being hopeful versus being a homer. I have a huge soft spot, like you were talking about him finding the zone in the defense. I played Jason Witten on scout team, Tennessee week. And, nice. I thought I was going to get to touch the ball. I was like, Billy Bob. Oh, look, it's a ball. I'm going to catch it. But no, I was literally like the jumbo H-back. And I probably got like 3 concussions that week. We were running, different. I didn't really get 3 concussions just to bring the CT ESPN folks, down from this. I shouted you out, Antonio Brown. You belong on this list. But when you think about longevity and you think about the way you remember players, what's really unfortunate for Jason Witten is that there was a time where he was as good as anybody, and he was all pro over Tony Gonzalez. He was all pro over Antonio Gates. These guys all existed at the same time. And so when you break them down, to have this list and to break this list down from a place of Gronk is unquestionable and undeniable, everyone's going to be fine with Kelsey because of the counting stats and recognize that the game is borderline flag football compared to, old school slobber knocker 3 yards in a cloud of dust stuff. But to have Jason Witten not even be a part, others receiving votes, honorable mention is a joke.
It is, man. And I think physicality is such a big part of the game. It's the aesthetics, just as you mentioned, of the graceful touchdown catch. And people are trying to imagine what they remember about a guy. The physicality that sprung DeMarco Murray in 2014 and Ezekiel Elliott in 2016 was huge. And not having a tight end sense that can really get down and dirty has been a major problem for this football team trying to become physical again. Jason Witten wouldn't let you be soft in practice, even though Wade Phillips and Jason Garrett tried sometimes. He wouldn't let it happen. And this team just has not been physical since he left. And I don't think you can underestimate or overestimate, I guess, how important that is. Let's go to tackles here as we look at ESPN's all-quarter century team. Who got the biggest snub? That's a pretty big snub to me, Jason Witten. But let's go to tackle where we might find a bigger one. We definitely are going to find a bigger one here, Newbear. I might need an Elements massage after this. Take it away.
I was sitting here for a second going, oh, yeah, the Eagles have the best line in football, and, Jordan, Mailata, what a player he is. And then you go, wait a minute, how long has that dude really been playing? And then you go, well, how many has he been all-pro? The guy made all-pro 2 last year and had never even been a Pro Bowler before that. And I don't understand how, what are we doing here, folks? You're talking about Walter Jones getting pushed down behind Trent Williams and Joe Thomas. And you go, all right, if you're from a certain part of the country, there's no freaking way. Walter Jones is one of those guys who flew under the radar. But those 3 guys, fine. Joe Thomas, Trent Williams, Walter Jones in some order. Where the hell is Tyron Smith? What are we doing?
Yeah. Well, he was only dominant for 4 or 5 seasons, Newbear.
No, he was an all-pro 10 years apart.
You
talk about longevity, you talk about, just the raw physicality and also the dancing bear stuff. He was all-pro 2 in 2013 for the first time, and then he went 1-2-1, so 4 years in a row. He's a Pro Bowler, I think, 4 out of the next 6 years, and then he's all-pro 2 again in 2013. So 10 years apart, 23 phenom on the rise, 33 still got – dude, I just can't. What are the criteria to have a job at ESPN? Because I feel like my 5-year-old daughter who joined the podcast last night could come in and make some shit up like this.
Jordan Mailata, bro. Jordan Mailata, what's he done? He's had one good year?
One all-pro nod, all-pro 2 nod, no Pro Bowls. I just can't. Oh, yeah, you heard me talking about you. Come here.
I guess like we're
all
saying
quarter century team left tackle right here.
Yeah, dude, no doubt about it, man. You got some beastly kids. I can't wait to watch them play sports on TV in the future. But this is hilarious. We can't have Zeke on there. You can't have some of these other Cowboys on there because they don't have the body of work. But here's Jordan flipping Mailata. I guess the international player pathway,
yes,
is
that was
more
something
important than recognizing one of the greatest left tackles to play for the greatest organization in the history of the world of sport.
Well, and that's the other thing.
Thanks,
like
ESPN.
whether you talk about recency bias or any of the other, like the Priest Holmes versus into a Zeke, like you were just saying, what criterion does Tyron Smith not meet? Like he's a pedigree guy, right? Who lives up to that potential? Who's just perennial Pro Bowler, 5-time All Pro, twice All Pro, one. But again, it's the 10 years apart thing for me, where if you dip, duck and dive, if you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball. And you hang on too long like Jason Witten did, but you're still the best in the game? Like, what are we talking about? Like, if we're betting futures and you were talking about Lamar, let's just get out ahead of this whole thing and say Jaden Daniels should have been on this team. If Jordan Mailata should have been on this team, then let's just put Jaden Daniels in the honorable mention.
Hey, he's going to be amazing, probably.
He's going to be amazing.
Yeah, he's probably. The way that he is trending, he will be the greatest quarterback of all time. He had the best rookie year ever, so clearly he should be on the list.
Hey, wait, buddy! You can't skip over Zach Martin. Let's give him some flowers real quick.
Oh, what was I doing? Yeah, we got to go back to right guard. Yeah. Zach Martin, beast. Larry Allen maybe should be in there with him because he was really good for 1 year at the start of the century. This is a no doubt. This
is one of the easiest ones to do. Zach Martin, Marshall Londa, keep it moving. It doesn't get any better. What's so crazy about Zach Martin coming out of the gates and doing it, 7? Was it 7 or 8 in a row? And doing that and playing that well, like we can't forget, because of the way it ended, how great it was for as long as it was. And I'm just double checking my math here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's 7 total ones, 9 All Pros in 10 years. Is that right? Dude, come on.
Yeah.
And remember,
hurt a lot of times.
And remember, he was 24 years old coming out. He was another like these 5th and 6th year guys with the COVID year and stuff. So there was he got old fast relative to a guy like Tyron Smith, who was like a 17-year-old freshman at USC.
He was,
right?
Yeah. He was 20 years old when he drafted him.
Right.
Yeah.
And that matters. Like when you talk about these big, beefy, or these really long, like guys like Quentin Nelson type of dudes, you want to be a knee bender or a waist bender. Zach Martin is, if you don't vote for him, if you're one of those jackasses who's like, well, I can't vote because nobody can have a higher rating than Babe Ruth. Like, come on, man. Like, if he's not 100 out of 100, they should take your Pro Football Writers Association card.
Well, since we jump back to the offense real quick, I think we should also mention center. And you said Jason Kelce. I wish Travis Frederick could be in that conversation. Just can't.
That's right. Yeah, 100%.
And then he got the neurological thing, really stunted his career. He was one of the great athletes of his era at the center position, though. And I talked about Jason Witten. Run game physicality just has not been the same since he came down with that condition in 2019. Tried to come back, wasn't the same. But salute to Big Trav, man, an absolute 10 out of 10 as well in the character department. So that kind of puts a bow on offense. Obviously, right tackle. I think the best right tackle so far has been Terrence Steele. And that's not saying a whole lot at all.
The one thing I will say about this is, and I'm a huge, can we just, every time I get an opportunity to say this, can we just celebrate 2019 LSU, the fact that Jordan, Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson were on the same, with Randy Moss's kid, come on, dude, with Clyde. Yeah. Those two dudes together. Justin Jefferson deserves every ounce of praise. But I was just thinking about this because I know they were going through the contract stuff together, and I know CD had some other guys ahead of him on the depth chart as a rookie, so he didn't get to 1,000 yards as a rookie, but he has gotten to 1,000 yards every year since. And in addition to that, it was CD Lamb right in 2023 leading the league in catches. And as great as Justin Jefferson is, he's like barely ahead. When you look at the counting stats, in 2022, he led the league, catches, yards, right? 2/3 of the Triple Crown. Like, the gap between Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb is not nearly as big as anyone thinks.
I agree.
It's right there.
I think Jefferson's like a quarter tick or maybe an eighth of a tick better because of his way to close on that football and secure the catch. But I think CeeDee Lamb could absolutely be, the best wide receiver in the game in any of the, the next 3 to 5 seasons.
I mean,
easily.
dude, Justin Jefferson, right, in 5 years has 40 touchdowns. CeeDee Lamb in 5 years has 38 touchdowns. Like when you look at the math of it and you go, Justin Jefferson 495 catches, CeeDee Lamb actually has one more catch, and the difference is when you go, okay, well, what did Justin Jefferson do with 495 catches at 15 yards per? He's already almost at 7,500 yards, where CD is 1,000 yards behind him at 6,300 and change. So it's like the big play stuff, right? The aerial acrobatics. That's gonna be really interesting to see if CD gets to do more of those things with Pickens loosening things up, and it's not all the clog and cover, shallow. Go make it work after the catch, little buddy.
But to your point, man, neither one of those guys deserves it over Antonio Brown and the absolute dominance.
No.
Yeah.
And Antonio Brown is great, and all the jokes that you make about CT, ESPN, and deservedly so. The dude has lost his mind, and he's printing money now, doing this thing. So hey, good for you. Not respect, but at least understanding. He was unbelievable. He was uncoverable. Like when you look back over time,
as a body catcher, he was.
I mean, come on, dude. When you look at him doing what he did at his size,
it was incredible.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
And then you look at and you measure it up against literally everybody. I mean, I know this is, let's keep this focus on the Cowboys snubs, but I think after LaDainian Tomlinson, Antonio Brown is probably the
good point. Yeah, that's a good point. Let's jump over here. Hey, buddy, we got to get this defense in. I think it's a fair point, and maybe another show there. D. Ware was the first defender mentioned, was the first edge mentioned. Total 10 out of 10 in the character department. Just set the standard for the quarter century on what an edge player looks like.
Yeah, and I mean, you talk about like Gronk, tight end that could play in any era. There is no doubt in my mind that if you drop DeMarcus Ware at the beginning of football time, he doesn't dominate. There's no doubt in my mind that if you drop him 20 years from now, he doesn't dominate. He's just one of those dudes.
They won't make anybody more predisposition to being an edge rusher, from any era. And he put all the work in, was an incredible teammate. So salute to D. Ware, salute to Jared Allen. He makes the list, and Myles Garrett, been in the league since 2017. I guess that's enough of a resume.
Can't do it.
Not ahead of TJ Watt?
Not ahead of TJ Watt, not ahead of probably 5 other guys. Like, I can't. You talk about recency bias and PFF grades and whatever. I mean, there's so much garbage with
6-time All-Pro, bro. 102.5 sacks.
Yeah. And
do you just not like him personally?
Well, irrespective of that, I've already told you if they make 50 Mission Impossibles, I'm just going to want to watch 51. I don't have to like Tom Cruise to appreciate the movie. Okay. And whether he's a douche nozzle or not, like, you can't do this. You just can't. Like, TJ Watt counting stats, not even close. They gave him a career achievement award, defensive player of the year. I'm just so sick of everyone kissing Myles Garrett's ass.
So who are you taking off this list to put TJ Watt on? Is it Myles Garrett or is it Jared Allen?
Myles Garrett. No, Jared Allen is one of those dudes where you talk about productivity and you talk about it for a long damn time. He was, I mean, what a player.
He was. This Myles Garrett thing's under your skin, though. I like it. I found the first live wire on our show. I mean, I tell you what, this Myles Garrett, man, he's something. Not only is he rushed the passer, but he's one of the best run defenders too. Like, why would you want to pick like Micah or TJ Watt, who are kind of one-dimensional players, when you got Myles Garrett here? He's the full package defensive end.
I mean, then let's talk about Terrell Suggs. Then let's talk about what's a defensive end versus an edge. Let's talk about Khalil Mack. There's so many other different types of this conversation. I mean, yeah, I mean, Micah Parsons, if we're gonna do 3 years of I'm so mad right. Priest Holmes is RB1, then give me Micah Parsons over Myles Garrett based on what he's done.
I love it.
I can't.
Well, hey, like 3 great Christian McCaffrey years got him on the list. Why shouldn't Micah Parsons be, in consideration for this list? I think there's been a lot of great edges And it's tough to choose. Michael Strahan's not on this list.
Yeah.
He's got a freaking.
I mean, the sack record, the super. I mean, people. Okay, so Terrell Suggs. Von Miller. Yeah, you brought up Strahan. I just. And for the record, you know what really bothers me about this setup is that they went out of their way to like, oh, look at us. We included J.J. Watt. We made a special play. J.J. Watt should be the first guy listed, period, right? In any of whatever conversation you want to have. And then his little brother, he's better. He just is. I just can't. I just freaking can't. And I would take Sizzle, and you could at least talk me into a conversation about Von Miller, a couple other guys. But if you're gonna talk about stopping the run, and then you're gonna talk about counting stats and defensive player of the year, all pro, but just being a dude among dudes. Myles Garrett had to make up a racial slur to go beat Mason Rudolph with his helmet, and I just can't get over the passive aggressive. Trade me. All I want to do is win. You want to pay me $40? Cleveland's the best situation ever. He's just so full of shit that I can't stand it.
I thought he really wanted out of Cleveland there for a while. I was surprised. I was surprised he ended up signing there. I would want out of Cleveland. I would refuse straight up to play for Cleveland, the New York Jets. I think that's it. I don't think I have any other teams.
You can't refuse. First of all, the Jets have the.
I would never play for the Bengals either.
Well, because you're never going to get paid. The uniforms are pretty sick.
They're losers. I want to win, bro. Okay, I'm going to get tens of millions of dollars no matter where I play if I'm great. I want to win.
Joe Burrow's healthy. They're going to win. They just went to the Super Bowl.
They can't pay him and have a defense and a running game at the same time.
Well, they're going to trade Hendrickson and they're going to move on, and it's going to be wild. And
yeah,
I agree with you because you bitch all the time about the Jones
okay
family.
At drafting.
Yeah, but you bitch all the time about the Jones family. The Brown family is even.
Yeah. I think when it comes to contracts and being penny pinchers and not doing things the right way, I think it's the Cowboys 31st and the Bengals 32nd in the NFL.
And the Steelers are right there too. There's high schools with better weight. There's high schools with better weight rooms. This is a real thing. Proud, great, classic franchises that aren't competing with real go-getters in front offices and ownership groups around the NFL. I think it applies to the Packers. I think it applies to the Steelers. It obviously applies to the Browns and Bengals. And the Cowboys, they just do it in a much more high-profile way. Defensive tackle quarter century, I can't really think of anybody. Jay Ratliff was nice. There's been some nice years, and David Irving was really good in the middle of the last decade. Just couldn't keep it on the rails long enough to have a great career. But now you have Osa, who is, really good. And I think he's going to have even a better year this year than he's had so far. So I think Osa might be the best defensive tackle that they've had this quarter century that I can think of. Maybe you go back into those Parcells and Wade Phillips teams and you could find somebody if you're jogging memories. Yeah, but I mean, you're talking about Aaron Donald, who many people consider the GOAT, and J.J. Watt, and the guys. I mean, this is like left guard and right guard on offense. I mean, this defensive tackle room is freaking loaded. I mean, you could argue that Calais Campbell's getting a little bit of a career achievement award, and some of the pure raw nose tackle guy like Casey Hampton, who they do mention, was a lot smaller than Vince Wilfork, which is why you would pick, in a head-to-head with both of them being 5-time All-Pros and stuff. But it's freaking wild to think. Could you imagine having Aaron Donald, Chris Jones, and freaking J.J. Watt lined up next to each other? And I mean, what do you want to do? I don't even care what you call the positions. Just let them turn those boys loose. Let them hunt.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to pass. That's for sure. We're going to be talking to Art Briles that week.
Yeah, I mean, they the thing that's really fun about this conversation is it gets you into a place where I started, like you were just talking about Jay Ratliff and stuff, and I was going back over time and saying, well, who else could you possibly try to force it? And you have these really, really neat conversations about guys like Terrence Newman, right, who averaged 15, 17, 20 passes defended, and he, I think he was only a Pro Bowler twice, but he's one of those guys who was so good for so long that maybe he's not all century. He's Cowboys quarter century for sure. But then how do you get him to knock on the door? And then you look at that cornerback room, and Charles Woodson isn't on this list. I mean, when you forget what ESPN did with Ladainian Tomlinson or Tyron Smith or Jason Witten. There's actually dudes on this list. Like the cornerback room is so loaded, and I know I'm skipping over the linebackers. So if you want to dig in there, there's not much.
I don't think the Cowboys have anybody in the conversation at corner, right? Like who's been their best corner?
No,
I guess Diggs. Terrence Newman, like you mentioned. Brandon Carr had some really mid seasons.
Right.
But, Revis, Bailey, Rondé Barber, Richard Sherman, Patrick Peterson, Jalen Ramsey on this on the practice squad.
And Charles Woodson's not even on the practice squad.
Crazy.
When you go back to the linebackers, the biggest what if. So you brought up Travis Frederick, right, as a center, and what happens, with his illness. How about Sean Lee in this linebacker room?
Yeah.
He never played a full 16-game season, right?
He was great, though. I love Sean Lee. Sean Lee might be my favorite Cowboy. The jersey I wear in the studio sometimes is the Sean Lee jersey. I don't know that any of these guys are better than totally fit Sean Lee. He's just as good as any of them.
I mean, the only time he played even 15 games, he was all pro, right? So, yeah. I mean, it's just, you talk about all-time what ifs. I mean, he's one of those guys for sure. For sure.
We've had some really good Cowboy linebackers, just haven't gotten the guy to stick and be the absolute Fred Warner beast that's, Mr. Reliable for a long time. And hey, Brian Urlacher, Levante David, Luke Kuechly, Derek Brooks, Bobby Wagner, they all deserve it more than Sean Lee, as much as I hate to say it. If he would have stayed healthy, it would have been – what's that?
And then Ray Lewis is up there too, right?
Yeah.
Think about how long that dude played. And – I love Urlacher. You talk about jerseys. I think I have every type of Brian Urlacher jersey there is. And when you think about what he did with the Tampa 2 running down the middle of the field, I think Brian Urlacher is almost in his own class of linebacker. And then you say that, and then you look at how Luke Kuechly played. Right, Ray Lewis is like right on the edge of, could Ray Lewis play today? Right, because he had a lot of interceptions in the counting stats and things that are there. But the game was, I mean, you were still dotting the I. It was him and Eddie George. That was a different deal. But then you forget how long that dude played. He played through different eras, and you would have to assume, based on how hard he worked, that he'd be able to figure it out in today's game. The thing with Urlacher, though, when you start talking about 6'5", 260, running 50 yards, everyone remembers Jerome Bettis running him over in the snow. Everyone gets got. Everyone, like it happens.
Yeah, no man wins.
I mean, Brian Urlacher, because of the versatility that he played with, and Luke Kuechly, he retired. When he walked away, he probably left 3-4 All Pros on the table. That dude, when you go back and look at him, and you particularly look at the Super Bowl year, and everyone focuses on Cam, and everyone talks about Christian McCaffrey, and there's stories, and there's Luke Kuechly. You cannot go very far when you're talking about the most complete linebackers ever play this game, and not include him in that conversation.
Okay, let's finish up here with safeties, brother. Cowboys' closest thing they've come, I guess, Ken Hamlin. I don't know. It was bad. It was Gerald Sensabaugh and Barry Church. That was a really solid tandem. Now it's Malik Hooker and Donovan Wilson. Like, the closest they got was maybe trading for Earl Thomas, who would have been a horrible idea to do that. They got Ed Reed, Troy Polamalu, Brian Dawkins, and then Earl Thomas. Charles Woodson is on their practice squad. There he is. I think Darren Woodson might have enough carryover that he could be on this list as well. I think he's one of the best Cowboys players of all time, one of the best safeties of all time.
They put Charles Woodson on the practice squad as a safety. That's wild.
Yeah,
that's wild. Okay, well, I guess he belongs in the DB room. Yeah, I think this is just one of those ones where, your guy Darren Woodson played a couple years in the early 2000s, but he wasn't the same guy, right? And when you're talking about Ed Reed and Troy Polamalu, those are the two that everyone says which one was the greatest of all time. This is a pretty cut and dry room.
Yeah, and it sucks because I'd like to think that the Cowboys would, maybe look at this situation and say, dude, we haven't been that great since we had all pro level safety play. Maybe that's a common link. Maybe, but this positional value thing, I think it's a trap because the Cowboys have used it to almost neglect spots. And if you're going to win a Super Bowl, I think you got to be at least good at every position. And right now, the way they've managed linebacker and safety, it's like they just need to get lucky and find a good, cheap player at that position for a very short Band-Aid time. They just aren't investing enough in it.
Yeah, they either don't keep guys or they can. I mean, because Hamlin would be a guy that you would throw in the top 10, and he was only there for 3 years, I think, right? And then you're so talking. I mean, you're going back over time. Any list that you're talking about with like the all-time great Cowboys safeties, it's mostly 70s, 80s, 90s. It's. I mean, Roy Williams. Roy Williams was a pretty damn good player.
There you go. Yeah, mid-2000s. Although, there's another guy whose status in today's game would be perhaps in question.
Right, and it didn't end well for him, right? I mean,
No. It was a quick ascent and descent for Roy Williams. I don't think he would have the longevity to be in this conversation. George Teague, there's a fun name, but that, was more late 90s and early 2000s. It's tough. You go back into the 70s, like you mentioned, and you have Cliff Harris, an absolute Hall of Famer, teamed with Charlie Waters, another Pro Bowl level guy, and then Woody. And then all of a sudden you get into the 2000s and the Cowboys were like, well, we don't want to pay safety because they don't, guard the wide receivers, or they don't get us, they don't sack the quarterback. So why would we want one of those?
You know how they talk about accidental basketball and all, you see the Kobe Bryant thing where he warned us about this, back RIP Kobe, Mamba forever. And the NBA is tough for me growing up with Jordan's Bulls and the triangle and all that stuff to watch this, YMCA 24-hour fitness level of offense. But I feel like there's some of that with the way that they think about the Cowboys think about the positional value, in as much as it's so rare to have an Ed Reed, a Troy Polamalu. Look at this list, right, where we're talking about Earl Thomas. Name another one. Earl Thomas, you got to go back to Brian Dawkins. Like, who else is even fighting to be on this list? Think about the all-timers and think about their contemporaries, right? When you're running around with guys like Ronnie Lott or Rod Woodson, who became a safety, or Charles Woodson, who became a safety. Like, when they're in that era and they're a game-changing type player, there's usually only one or two of them in that era. So what's going to be really interesting to see with Eberflus is, we talked a little bit about it last week, where Eberflus wants his guys to have their eyes on the ball so that they can break on the ball and so that they can make plays. And a guy like Donovan Wilson, with the attitude, right, with the ability to just have that, I might get beat, but I might take it the other way, that just like no fear in that moment. And also that
he's a playmaker, dude. He's a dog and a playmaker.
Yeah.
I'll put up with the downside on Donovan Wilson because he's going to come up with that ball.
Yeah.
And he's going to be talking trash the whole time. I love his game, and I hope you're right about Eberflus, man. That's actually kind of exciting.
Well, it's fun to think about, how bad things were in Chicago because of all the other restraints, constraints, all the other just bullshit around him. And we talked about how, they inherited arguably the worst cap, the worst draft, but also all the dead money. And it was maybe the worst roster in football on top of all that. And you go, like, how much of the blame does any one person take? And just like wins aren't really a quarterback stat, like wins and losses aren't just up to the head coach, right? Look at what Bill Belichick did without Brady. Let's have a real conversation about genius level CEOs. And
but what we just did there, though, buddy, sorry to cut you off, is we just went through the entire defense with no real snubs. So as what that tells me is, as much as Eberflus is going to do a nice job, the Cowboys don't invest enough in defense. They haven't found enough quality players there.
Let's not forget that New York is crying right now because there isn't a giant, on this, even in the honorable. Like, there are entire franchises that don't even exist in this conversation. They don't have one player at one position who's even worthy of the practice squad. Like, what we're talking about here is, there's a few guys that are on the team. There's a few guys that should be on the team. And then there's a couple other guys that you look back and you go, wow, he was a really fucking good player. And then you sit there and you go, what has been missing? And what's going to be really interesting headed to Oxnard, thinking about the 53 up, or the 53 that make it the 46 up on Sunday with this squad, is the speed, the length, the culture. And it's like, okay, so we need Micah to do this, right? Yeah. We need Dak to do this. Maybe a little yoga and Pilates for the next 30 days. And what I'm really excited about is to go from some nonsensical conversation where, you want to talk about the Jones family engagement farming with contracts. How about ESPN engagement farming with Jordan Mailata?
Yeah, that was brutal. ESPN, you're better than that. How about we do this real quickly before we wrap up, Newbear? Current Cowboys most likely to be on the next all-decade team. It's
Lamb.
Micah, it's CeeDee. Who else?
Yeah, it's CeeDee Lamb for sure. Well, and then let's
Tyler
talk about
Smith.
Well, so that's the interior of this line is the next big opportunity to rise.
Jaden Blue.
All-decade team. Well, so what's interesting, we were talking about, we're kicking this around a little bit. Is he going to return kicks? Is he anything else? Devin Hester, you are ridiculous. Let's not forget they tried to make him a wide receiver and it made him a worse returner, right? I mean, we never know exactly how some of this stuff's going to sort out. All-decade team, Jaden Blue, let's be real. He probably doesn't touch the ball enough. At the same time,
Trayvon Diggs gets healthy and picks off 30 more passes.
30 more passes. If Diggs is, if the knee they grew for him in a petri dish, takes hold, it connects with his 23andMe.
Overshown.
Same thing with the knee, right? What about Easy? Isn't it Easy? Yeah,
there you go. Ezra Raku's got a shot at this.
Yeah.
I think Sam Williams has the talent for it, but he would do something within 18 months to totally derail his career. I hope Marshawn Nealon can develop the pass rushing skills because he's got strong hands and a good body. He would be a great defensive end, I think, for the next decade. And if he can figure out a way to get to the quarterback more, and Newbear, he did not have a reputation for that in college, but last year he showed more than he had in college. And now he's got, a defensive line coach and a DC who is going to prioritize getting up the field even more.
Yeah,
that's a long shot though. Maybe Siobhan Ravel. How about Siobhan Ravel, the corner? Maybe the only other guy on defense I could see.
God, he's so long and he's so fast, and it's so much fun to think about. But you know what I was just thinking about? Can I do something absolutely insane?
Do it.
Can I do something absolutely insane? Last year, Dak Prescott played 8 games. His hamstring and some bone came with it, right? And he wasn't even touched, right? Sniper got him from the upper deck. He played 8 games in his age 31 season, and we talked about how ugly it looked, in those 8 games. You know what I was looking at the other day, which is pretty wild? Do you know who played exactly 1/4 of one game in his age 31 season?
1/4 of one game in his age 31 season. Tom Brady?
Yeah. That was 2008, coming off of the missing perfection that Pollard got him. It was the first quarter of that game, wasn't it? It was certainly early in that game, and he missed the torn
ACL.
That was 2008. He was 31. So then in his age 32 season, right, they're 10-6, and he's kind of feeling his way back. Didn't trust it. Remember, he had an infection, and there was another surgery. But in his age 33 season, the year after the knee, they're 14-2, and he's 36-4 touchdown to interception. And he's AP.
You're going Dak on the next all-decade team.
Here's what I'm just curious about.
The stats are there.
I'm just curious. Like all the malignancy and the metastasization of.
Hey, I'm a Dak fan. I'm just a realist.
I saw this thing going back and forth on Twitter today. I refuse to call it X. Get off my lawn. That's the phase of life that I'm loving real much right now. But
I can tell.
But I'm just thinking about this for a second. Like. All the dude did was come in as a 4th-round pick and go 13-3 as a rookie. And all he's done when healthy since then is win. And you can say, regular season, against bad teams, or against bad teams. Then he chokes in the playoffs. We're gonna get into some of that stuff, right? Uh-huh. But like, all kidding aside, we know this dude puts in the work, right? He worked too hard coming back from the ankle. Do we think Dak wants to play till he's 40? Like,
no.
Do we think Dak wants to play till he's 35? What do we got? 3 more years of Dak?
Yeah, I think somewhere between 35 and 38 is fair. As a guy who went through ankle reconstruction myself, it just affects so much in your leg. There's going to be wear and tear way ahead of schedule for him.
I just want to say that Joe Burrow's dad bet $2,000 on him to win the Heisman and won $400,000. Give me the line on Dak Prescott, quarterback of the decade, and let's go get a pool going. We'll sell my Ladainian cleats and we'll throw some money on it. I just think it's fun to look at. I'm not saying Dak is Tom Brady. Tom Brady is the greatest to ever do it.
It's fun.
It's fun to think about the career that Tom Brady had after he blew out his knee in week 1 of his age 31 season.
That's cool. And I think Dak does have a track record of coming back well from injury. So, there's that to look at as well. And I'm all for it. I mentioned in a short, I think earlier in the week that all he needs is a Super Bowl and he'll have a Hall of Fame resume. Does he get in or not? I don't know. There's going to be a lot of quarterbacks with great stats from this era, but I mean, the shoe kind of fits. I think it's schedule related. Here's a tease for the Romo Dak debate as we look at the Cowboys all quarter century team. I just think Dak played in a much more soft division. Tony actually had to deal with teams in the Giants that were tough. And I know the Eagles have won 2 Super Bowls in the Dak era. But outside of that, the Commanders and Giants were a dumpster fire, and the Eagles have had a lot of bad seasons since 2016 because they know how to ride the salary cap yo-yo. Unlike. So let's not lose focus as we go through this and talk about the pluses and minuses of Cowboys, that really their disappointment is because their front office doesn't make them complete teams. And the players that are on this all quarter century team that are champions played with great organizations, right? Or organizations win championships. And, the Cowboys, if you scored them on this, they're nowhere near the practice squad. For the last quarter century, you would get through about 25 teams, I believe, before you found, where about the Cowboys belong, and the proof's in the pudding. Everybody else has made the conference championship game now.
Okay, so if that's the qualifier conference championship game, that's where it gets tough because he still has to do that, And I just the notoriety of it all. I think somewhere between hopeful and homer, and I'm just sitting here thinking that when you talk about guys having a lot of really pretty stats, but he's won a lot of games. I think that's when you look at wins and losses. Divisional champ, but they haven't ascended. They haven't taken that step.
I guess I got sideways there. I just want to show deference and respect to Romo and Dak, who are great players that I think could win the Super Bowl. The team is just, has gotten really, really good at not being good enough to win a divisional round game. And I don't think that's a coincidence. They're the common link. All these different players. You're looking at a quarter century. I don't think it's a coincidence or bad luck. We'll get into that more. You can check our feed every day for shorts and shorter longs and read all we got going on at howaboutwow.com. Great job tonight, Newbear. Hell of a time talking football with you. And until tomorrow, how about wow?